ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमोत्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदिविषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In the Friday Atma Vichara session from Ramanacentre Center for Learning, we have been reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry, 1900 to 1950, a wonderful compilation of all the questions put to Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara and Bhagavan's reply to it. This has been done by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. After looking at this week's question and answer and meditating upon it, then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara practice session. Following that, our president, Dr. Sarada Akka, would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita. Again, Ramana Gita is again a question answer, many questions put to Bhagavan, which have been compiled by Ganapati Muni in Sanskrit, similar to Bhagavad Gita with 18 chapters. And Akka would be looking at this week's question and answer from the 11th chapter and meditating on it. Finally, we will be having the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In the connected questions that we have been reading from the book Self-Enquiry, 1936 to 1950, in the 1936 to 1950 section, there has been a question put by a gentleman about going for Ekanta Seva, so that he feels that he will not be able to achieve the silence of the mind or the control of the mind, and therefore he asks Bhagavan's grace so that he could be in Ekantam. And Bhagavan says in the last week question answer we saw, if having come to Tiruvannamalai and being close to Bhagavan, if one has not appeared to have achieved the control of the mind or the silence, what is the need of all the desire to go from one place to another? Because it will be the same mind which we will be carrying, or we are only expecting the control of the mind from an external source or an external environment. Bhagavan goes on to give the story of Swami Vivekananda, wherein in the story, somebody tries to bury the shadow, and as soon as he buries the shadow would appear on the sand on which he had buried it. So like that, trying to control the mind through an external environment, Bhagavan says that it is like keeping the mind active and trying to control, believing the mind to be real and trying to control it. So one Bhagavan finally tells him that one needs to go to the bottom of the thought and find out the root of the thought, where the thoughts spring from. And that is when one can achieve it. In the continuation of that question, the devotee today, we will look at question number 110 and 111, which is connected with the same subject of ekanta or mind control. Devotee says, when I spent an hour or two on the hill yonder, I sometimes found even better peace than here, which suggests that a solitary place is after all more conducive to mind control. To which Bhagavan replies, true, but if you had stayed there for an hour longer, you would have found that place too not giving you the calm of which you speak. Control the mind and even hell will be heaven to you. All other talk of solitude, living in a forest, etc. is mere prattle. Then the devotee asks, if solitude and abandonment of home were not required, where then was the necessity for Sri Bhagavan to come here in his 17th year? Bhagavan replies, if the same force that took this meaning himself here, that took this here, should take you also out of your home, by all means let it. But there is no use of your deserting your home by an effort of your own. Your duty lies in practice, continuous practice of self-enquiry. A.R. Natarajanji highlights this. Your duty lies in practice, continuous practice of self-enquiry. Now, these two questions are something that we all have so got accustomed to object-oriented way of living, understanding. So we expect some objects externally would help, or an external circumstances would help, and maybe certain experiences of ours. Like in this case, the gentleman was in the hill and he found his mind to be very, very peaceful. So many concepts, many ideas, and many places often appear to be helpful. But that is only if we, as Bhagavan says, if we were to stay with that idea, because it's all in the mind, it's all in the intellect, and forgetfulness or something overtaking it is quite possible. And attention goes away from that place. I may be physically in a Arunachala hill. If my attention goes away somewhere else, then I may not feel that peace at all. So Bhagavan is saying here that the external factors, though it may be an aid, but that is not the real thing that we should look for. We have to inquire within, because there is a natural state. We all have experienced it. Bhagavan again and again reminds us of the deep sleep. When there is no mind, then there is no such external circumstances that we seek. There is no idea of being in the home or being in the forest. One finds oneself in full peace, and none of his experiences, past or other which way, bothers him, bothers us. Therefore, it is very, very important, Bhagavan is saying here, that we consciously enter that in the waking, because the same entity which was in the deep sleep is also present right now. The same entity which experienced absence of thoughts, absence of all mind, world, of being a gruhastha or a man or a woman, the same entity which helped us recognize it in the deep sleep, the total absence of all of it, and the same entity which said that it was very peaceful sleep, therefore there was no disturbance, is the same entity which is right now is also available when something is claiming there is disturbance. So the Bhagavan is asking us to go to the root of it. And when we do so, then we experience a natural solitude, a natural peace. And therefore Bhagavan says, once we reach there, what is reaching there? The reaching there is to identify ourselves as that, and not having an experience for a small amount of time or being in samadhi for half an hour or something. It is total identification of our oneself with that. That alone will help us experience full peace, whether we are in hell or in, as Bhagavan says, or in heaven, because the attention is no more outward turned. When we identify ourselves with that truth, the attention is completely established in that truth, or the attention is established on itself. In that solitude, there is a natural peace no matter what is the external circumstance. And that Bhagavan calls is the real mind control. Naturally, the other which way, the mind is running up behind objects. The mind imagines objects, imagines divisions, itself being separate from the object, and tries to possess or move away from the object. And that is what we experience in the waking. And that actually makes us feel very tired, because we are jumping from one object to another, though there is only one truth that we are always experiencing. No matter whether there is a presence of object or an absence of the object, there has to be oneself existing. Therefore, there has to be one who has to be aware. Though our continuous experience is of existence, of awareness, but since the attention of the mind is towards object, that is, there is a conscious attention to objects and division, and there is a conscious ignorance towards that pure being, pure existence, pure awareness. That conscious attention to objects and division is ignorance. And because we identify ourselves with the body, and then we identify either ourselves with the thought, and we feel something else is apart from it. Whereas when we identify ourselves with the pure consciousness, the pure existence, which neither rises nor diminishes, and which is continuous, whether it is waking, dream, or sleep, and we identify ourselves as that, very important. As clearly as now how we identify ourselves with the body, there is absolutely no iota of doubt right now that I am Dileep, I am this body. Bhagavan says, like that, if somebody questions, are you a man? We would be very sure I am a man. Like that, there should be a clear idea with that pure consciousness, says Bhagavan. Because there should not be any doubt there. And if there is a doubter, then again, more than one objects seem to be there. Therefore, there is a doubt between A and B, and therefore the division is given reality. And whenever we see two, duality, we see doubts, fear, everything appear. So Bhagavan further continues to say that the same when he puts a question about why then did Bhagavan come to Tiruvannamalai? If solitude was not necessary, he could have been very much at his home. And in this answer, Bhagavan is saying that same force which brought Bhagavan to Tiruvannamalai, if it decides to do so for the other gentlemen too, so be it. But we should not make a conscious effort. The only conscious effort Bhagavan advises us to do is turn our attention to that source by inquiring to whom is this, who am I? That unchanging truth. If we put our attention to all these ideas, perceptions that we have, okay, Bhagavan came to Tiruvannamalai, why shouldn't I go? I should also probably will experience this. Then Bhagavan doesn't advise that. And in another way, Bhagavan is also saying here, whatever the body, the mind, the intellect has to go through, some external force keeps it that way. Like it kept Bhagavan in Tiruvannamalai, in Ramanacentre. Like that it has kept this body and this mind somewhere else. And one need not be worried where that body and that mind is kept by that force. One need to now understand that body, the body and the mind and the intellect will be taken care by that force because it has brought it for some purpose of it. And one need not now get worried about it. So one can free oneself from all of it. One can turn the attention now to the source of all of that. That means to that pure being, that pure consciousness. And Bhagavan therefore advises practice, practice, practice. So in a way we can see the whole of this practice where it takes us is that the books or the guru ask us to turn from outside to within. And when we genuinely practice and practice and practice as they have advised us, and not to turn outward, not to make the mind go outward to divisions, but to turn inward and look for whom is this, who am I? Turn inward. When the practice starts initially there, the practice brings a clarity that oneself is that truth, the unchanging truth. There is again a recognition here. It is like Bhagavan says, like the recognition of the necklace on one's neck. One was looking for it outside and then finally finds out to be very much in place naturally on the neck. But that again, there is a difference between the one who identifies the necklace and then the necklace. There is a subject-object divide there. Further practice brings the clarity that only when we establish ourselves as that which we verily are and abandon the whole of the outside, the whole of the object divide, and then only the natural peace would be found, and then the external environment doesn't matter at all. And that final establishment of oneself as that truth which one verily is by the pure grace. And that is the culmination. And that is what Krishna calls it as Yadgatva nahi vardante tadhama paramam mama. Having reached that, one will not return back to the duality, the world of the duality. One identifies oneself with that, and that is what happens by the continuous practice. And Bhagavan says, grace is vouched for those who practice. So, the abundant grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us get into practice. No matter how many thoughts, how many objects appear, whether it is subtle or gross, we should diligently inquire to whom is this, and therefore recognize it is for me. And then further inquiring, who am I? What do I really refer to as I? Or where from this thought I and all these thoughts rise? When we turn our attention to the source, here and now, by the grace of Bhagavan, we recognize ourselves as the unchanging truth, which is continuous, unbroken. And by repeated attention to it and nothing else, Bhagavan assures that His grace will make the truth rise and get established. The truth alone will remain, says Bhagavan. With His abundant grace, for the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichar. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining is the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we in this part of the Friday Satsang are meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita. These are the questions by various seekers of truth to Bhagavan Ramana and his answers, which have all been compiled by Ganapati Muni and classified into 18 chapters like the Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit. They have been recorded in Sanskrit by Ganapati Muni, classified into 18 chapters. The previous week we were meditating on chapter 11. We concluded the meditations on chapter 11. In chapter 11, Muni is the questioner, and he had first had a vision of Bhagavan as Lord Subramanya. The first part of chapter 11 describes the glory of Bhagavan as Subramanya. And in the second, almost end of the chapter 11, the Muni questions Bhagavan on the compatibility between jnana and siddhis. Is a jnani capable of performing siddhis or miracles, or does a jnani have the power to perform miracles? And Bhagavan had replied saying that the jnani is not really interested. There can be two types of manifestation of the jnani, whereas there is no difference in the jnana. The manifestation could be that some of the jnanis do display the miraculous powers and some of them don't. And this does not make any difference to them. They will just go according to God's plan, which he calls the prarabdha. They go according to God's plan. If the plan is that they should display some siddhis, they do so. If not, they remain as the ocean, the waveless ocean. So Bhagavan says that the self alone is the repository of all power. So that is the answer which Bhagavan has already given about power, the power of the self, the power of being. But in the 12th chapter, we have Kapali dwelling more on the concept of power or Shakti. The 12th chapter is called Shakti Vichara. So now we will begin the 12th chapter. In the 12th chapter, Kapali asks 4 questions of Bhagavan. The Muni had asked only one question. Kapali asks 4 questions. Eko navimshe divase Bharadvajo Mahamanaha Kapali Kriti Shujjayan Aprichadramanam Gurum. Muni always records the date of the conversation. This is the 19th of July, 1917. Eko navimshe divase. The year is not mentioned here, but the year is mentioned in the previous chapters, and we find that practically all the questions are taking place, are really given to Bhagavan or posed to Bhagavan in a short period of about a month of the Chaturmasya of the year 1917. Then this is Kapali's question. Vishayi Vishayo Vrittir iti dam Bhagavan strikam Jnaninam pamaranam cha lokayatra sudrishyate. So the Trikam, the trinity, the triad of seer, seen and seeing, the Triputi, which divide the Vishaya and the Vishayi, the seer and the seen. This is common for Jnani and the Pamara, the Ajnani, the knower and the ignorant one. This is what we see, says Kapali. Jnaninam Pamaranam cha Lokayatra Sudrishyate. In the Lokayatra, in their journey in the world, this seems to be common. Even a knower of the self seems to be having this Triputi. He seems to have the sense of I, the sense of what he sees, and he is interacting the same way with the world as the ignorant one is interacting. So Kapali says, based on this fact, atha kena visheshena jnani pamaratodhikaha imam menath sandeham nivartayitumarhasi. When this is the case, when everyone is behaving or living in the world in a similar manner, what is the greatness of the jnani in relation to the ignorant one? Why is the jnani considered to be greater than the ignorant one? And this answer which Bhagavan gives here, later he has spoken about this in Ulladu Narpadu, which is translated by Muni into Saddarshanam. Ajñasya vignasya cha vishwamasti purvasya drishyam jagadeva satyam. So there Bhagavan has said, yes, the world exists for the jnani and the ajnani. So here Bhagavan is giving the reply to Kapali. What is the difference which he says over there? The same difference we find stated over here also by Bhagavan. Bhagavan uvacha abhinno vishayiyasya swarupan manujarshabha. O great one, O great Manujarshabha, great one, O abhinno vishayiyasya swarupan. If the world or the Vishaya, the scene, is not apart from the Swarupa, for such a person, for the man, for whom the Vishaya is not apart from the Swarupa, Vyapara Vishayau Bhataha Tasya abhinnau swarupataha tasya abhinnau swarupataha. Even though he is moving in the world, even though he sees all the objects, these objects are not different from the Swarupa. They are not apart. Abhinnau tasya abhinnau swarupataha. When Bhagavan had talked about siddhis also, Bhagavan says all the movement of the siddhis, all the miracles, everything is happening only in the self. The jnani does not even perceive the siddhis as something apart from the self. Nothing is seen apart from the self. In the very first chapter, when Muni talks about Satya Satya Viveka, should we have the discrimination between what is real and what is false? Even there, Bhagavan says, Jnani does not say something is unreal because everything is part of the self. So here also Bhagavan is reiterating that though the Jnani appears to be acting in the world, he is firmly established in the self. There is no such thing as an object separate from the self. Nothing is separate from the self for him. But what is the see, beautifully the words have been couched by Ganapatini. Abhinno vishayi yasya swarupa. So again, but what about Ajnani? What about the ignorant one? Vibhinno vishayi yasya swarupat. Vibhinno vishayi yasya swarupat abhimaninaha. For one who is seeing the objects as apart from the self. Vibhinno vishayi yasya swarupat abhimaninaha. Vyapara vishayo bhatah tasya bhinnau swarupatah. So, the shining of the objects, bhati, the shining of the all the vishayas, the world, the objects are seen as apart from the self. So that is the difference between the jnani and the ajnani. For the ajnani, there is duality. For the jnani, there is no duality. There is nothing apart from the self. The presence of duality marks ignorance. If there is even slightest duality, if I see anything as apart from the self, then I can understand that I am still caught in ignorance. If I see that, oh, this is happening to me, this is happening to someone else. There is a world. I see the world. Even if I see the world as a sakshi, even if I see the world with detachment, there is a world and I am there and I am looking at it with detachment. That means the presence of ignorance is still there. That's what Bhagavan is reiterating, that duality and non-duality are the differentiating factors. So the absolute abidance in the non-dual consciousness is the mark of the jnani. Veda bhase vijanati jnanya bhedam tu tatvikam. Veda bhase vijanati. See the tatvika, the jnani knows the abhasa of the bheda, the illusion of differences, that abhasa, bheda abhasa vijanati jnanya abhedam tu tatvikam. Even though he sees the movement of multiplicity, even though he sees the movement of duality, still there is no bheda. So the whole thing is known to be light within light, water within water, or even such a difference is not there. Such a thing, such a statement is only for us to say light within light or water within water. It is difficult for us to explain it because we have to explain in words, and words are in the realm of duality. But we can only understand what Bhagavan is saying, that there is no duality. There may appear to be movement, but there is no duality at all. However, Bhedabhasa vasham gatva pamarastu vibhidyate. The pamara, the ignorant one, the common man, he gets caught by the abhasa of bheda, the appearance of duality, vasham gatva, getting caught by the, getting trapped by the abhasa, the appearance of duality. Pamarastu vibhidyate. The pamara gets deluded. The pamara is constantly worried by this or that, even to the point that solitude is seen as an object, a place. Solitude is not, we saw in this question in the earlier part of today's satsang, which Dileep was dwelling on, that solitude is seen as a something, as an object, as an experience to be attained. Self is also seen as something to be attained. We are that much in the grip of duality. So the point is that as and when the duality arises in any form whatsoever in our mind, we must recall Bhagavan saying that we should not get trapped by it. The duality is enticing. It keeps trying to lure us by saying, this is good, this is bad. We get caught in both. We get caught in the good also. And we get caught in the bad. In fact, we probably get more caught up in bad than good. Because when something is good, we enjoy it and then it's over after that. But when something is bad, when there is a bad experience, a negative experience, the mind keeps dwelling on it again and again. It goes back to it. So that is how the ego traps us with negative emotions and negative experiences very easily. So, it is for us to remember that we should not get into this trap, that vasham gatva. We should not get carried away by appearances. Bheda abhasa. It is only an appearance. We must constantly get the mind back to the source through enquiry. Thought has appeared, but thought is only an appearance. What is an appearance? That which comes and goes and has no basis of its own. What is a thought? It comes and goes. And how does it arise? Where does it arise? It arises only in the self. What is it? What is its real nature? It is of the pure nature of light, of consciousness. Because we feel it has an image. Why do we feel it has an image? Because we feel there is an I which is experiencing this. When we question the thought and get back to the source, what happens? When we realize, hey, this thought itself is non-existent. This thought is actually only a mirage. It's only an appearance. There is no such thing. There is no such stuff sitting inside. It is not concrete. Then what about the thinker? Thinker is also not concrete. There is no such thing as thinker. Every time a thought arises, one thinker is appearing there. So the thinker creates himself through the thought and hides behind the thought and then just remains hidden. So when the thought is removed, there is no thinker, there is no separate entity. The self alone shines. And then all the play, what it will be, Bhagavan says, it is just a play in the self. For us, when that anubhavam comes, even this doubt will go away. This doubt between the difference between a jnani and an ajnani or any other doubt can only arise so long as one is in the realm of duality, in the realm of the self. There is no doubt. Of course, sometimes the great ones raise questions, like Muni might have raised questions which may not be really questions for him, but he would have raised them because he has perceived that many people in the realm of duality have all these doubts. And in order to bless them with Bhagavan's answer, in order to bless all of us with Bhagavan's answers, sometimes the Muni may ask questions even though he has the Atmanubhava. But normally, Bhagavan says, so long as ignorance is there, doubts will arise, questions will arise. Let us treat all of them as thoughts. But we are benefited by these questions and these doubts because they help us to get back to the self through Bhagavan's answers. And Bhagavan's answers repeatedly ask us to hold on to the self. He does not move away even an iota from the Atmanubhava. Whether you ask him about siddhis, whether you ask him about Mahavakyas, whether you ask him about Satya, Satya, Viveka, whatever the question, Bhagavan takes the attention back to the core, to the self. That alone matters and is Grace is ever abundant to take us back to that state, to the natural state, and help us and make us abide there. Om Namo Bhagavate Shivaya.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabiram Chinta Vihinam Hridi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hridi Chintayami. Namo Ramana, Namo Ramana.